For privacy reasons, the names of individuals involved in this case have been changed. Stay tuned. On a cold winter night in January 1992, a horrific crime occurred in Indiana, shocking the entire United States. Lynn Carter, an innocent 12-year-old girl, suddenly disappeared without a trace. But the truth behind her disappearance was more brutal than anyone could have imagined. Lured into a cruel trap by 4 teenage girls, Lynn endured terrifying hours before being murdered in the most barbaric way. This was more than just a murder. This was a story of jealousy, hatred, and a rage that spiraled out of control, leaving an indelible wound in the history of American crime, where every unsolved mystery contains secrets that want to be revealed. Step into the darkness and explore them with us. Don't hesitate to leave a like as an encouragement for us, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to update the most classic cases. Lynn Carter was born on June 6, 1979, in Pineville, Kentucky. She lived with her mother since her parents divorced. Her mother, Caroline Carter, tried to provide a stable life for her daughter, despite financial difficulties. When Lynn was 12 years old, the two moved to New Albany, Indiana, to start a new life. There, Lynn attended Hazelwood High School and quickly became friends with her new classmates. Lynn was a cheerful, sociable girl who made friends easily. At Hazelwood, she met April Stevens, a 15-year-old girl. April had a strong personality and was somewhat rebellious, but she and Lynn quickly formed a close friendship. The two often hung out, confided in each other, and spent a lot of time together. However, not everyone was happy to accept this friendship, especially Rachel Morgan, a 16-year-old girl with a turbulent past. Rachel Morgan is April's ex-girlfriend. She's a violent, impulsive teenager who has shown signs of being overly controlling in her relationship with April. After the breakup, Rachel still has deep feelings for April and cannot accept Lynn becoming closer to the girl she once loved. Jealousy quickly turns into hatred, and Rachel begins to harbor thoughts of revenge. Not stopping at threatening Lynn with harsh words or threatening messages, Rachel plans to teach Lynn a terrible lesson. To carry out this plan, Rachel does not act alone. She seeks the help of Jessica Tate, 17 years old, Monica Reed, 15 years old, and Sarah Bryant, 15 years old, girls who have one thing in common. They love the feeling of power and control and are not afraid of violence. Jessica Tate is the most influential person in the group, known for her cruel personality, liking to torture others for her own satisfaction. Monica Reed is Jessica's best friend and often goes along with Jessica's wishes. Sarah Bryant, the youngest of the group, is willing to participate in barbaric acts without hesitation. The 4 girls work together to not only kidnap Lynn, but also to torture her in the most brutal way. None of them stop to think about the consequences, and none of them feel any remorse for what is about to happen. They turn a senseless jealousy into a horrific tragedy that no one could have foreseen. On the evening of January 10, 1992, 4 teenage girls, Rachel Morgan, Jessica Tate, Monica Reed, and Sarah Bryant, set out to carry out their cruel plan. The group drove a light-colored car to Lynn Carter's home in New Albany, Indiana. In the car, Rachel, the main conspirator, hid in the back seat, waiting in the shadows, while Monica and Sarah were tasked with luring Lynn out. To catch Lynn off guard, Monica and Sarah pretended to be friendly, saying that they were friends of April Stevens, and that April wanted to see Lynn immediately. They cleverly fabricated a story that April was in trouble and needed Lynn's help. Initially, Lynn refused, as her mother did not allow her to stay out late. But after several minutes of hesitation and with the belief that April really needed her, Lynn finally agreed to go with them. As Lynn got into the car, the group of young girls quickly drove away, taking her to an abandoned house in the suburbs of Jeffersonville, Indiana, a house owned by Jessica Tate's family. When they arrived, Lynn still did not realize anything was wrong. But when Jessica got out of the car, Rachel suddenly rushed out of the back seat, holding a shiny knife and holding it to Lynn's neck. Lynn panicked and tried to resist, but Rachel quickly restrained her. The group dragged Lynn into the abandoned house, where the real nightmare began. Inside the house, Rachel ordered Lynn to take off her clothes. When Lynn hesitated, Rachel used a knife to cut a line on her body, causing Lynn to scream in pain. In front of Lynn's extreme fear, Jessica and Monica held the victim down, while Rachel continued to torture her. Rachel brutally beat Lynn, pulling her hair, jerking her head back, and forcing Lynn to kneel in front of her. Not stopping there, Rachel took a knife and made small cuts on Lynn's body, laughing and threatening at the same time. In a fit of rage, she used a lighter to burn a section of Lynn's hair, filling the room with the smell of burning hair. Despite the torture, Lynn still begged for her life. She promised not to tell anyone, but that only made Rachel even more elated. Jessica, who was manipulated by Rachel, also joined in the torture. She kicked Lynn hard, causing her to fall flat on the floor. While Lynn was moaning in pain, Monica and Sarah just stood by, but no one intervened. Monica even laughed when Rachel and Jessica tied Lynn's hands and feet tightly with rope, leaving her completely helpless. After torturing Lynn for hours in the abandoned house, the group decided to take the victim to a forest near the Ohio River to continue the torture. They stuffed Lynn into the back seat of the car and drove around all night. While driving, Rachel and Jessica occasionally pulled over to the side of the road, opening the car door to check if Lynn was still alive. Seeing that the girl was still breathing, Rachel hit Lynn hard on the head with a stick, while Jessica laughed gleefully. The group continued to drive around for hours, intentionally prolonging the time so that Lynn would suffer more pain. Finally, in the early morning of January 11, 1992, they drove to a deserted area near the Ohio River. By this time, Lynn was exhausted. Her face was bruised, her body was covered in wounds, but she still tried to beg for her life. Rachel ordered Jessica and Monica to pull Lynn out of the car. The girl was shivering in the cold, her body purple from the wounds. But instead of stopping, Rachel continued to inflict more pain on the victim. Rachel ordered Jessica to stab Lynn with a knife, but Jessica seemed hesitant. Not wanting to wait any longer, Rachel took the knife herself and stabbed Lynn many times, causing her to collapse to the ground. Despite her serious injuries, Lynn was still alive, gasping for breath in a pool of her own blood. Not wanting to leave any trace, Rachel decided to burn the victim alive. The group dragged Lynn to a vacant lot, doused her with gasoline, and set her on fire. The fire quickly spread, consuming everything. Lynn's weak screams rang out in despair before she was completely engulfed in flames. After making sure Lynn was dead, the group got into their car and drove away as if nothing had happened. On the morning of January 11, 1992, as a cold fog still covered the Ohio River forest, two hunters walking along a remote trail came across a haunting sight, a charred body lying in the dry grass. The sight was so horrifying that they immediately called the police. When police arrived at the scene, they immediately realized that this was no ordinary death. The victim's body was almost completely burned, but traces of multiple stab wounds and other injuries could still be seen on the skin that had not been burned by the fire. Investigators noticed traces of gasoline on the ground, indicating that the victim had been deliberately set on fire. Footprints around the scene also indicated that this was a premeditated murder, not an accident or suicide. Next to the body, police found several pieces of evidence, including burnt cloth, rope, and a gasoline can left nearby. The case was immediately classified as a brutal murder, and the police began to collect information to find out the identity of the victim, as well as the perpetrator. Because the body was almost completely burned, it was very difficult to identify the victim. However, based on the height, body size, and some remaining traces, the police suspected that this could be Lynn Carter, a 12-year-old girl who had been reported missing by her family the night before. Lynn's mother was extremely panicked when the police arrived to confirm this suspicion. She said that Lynn never went out at night without permission, and there had been no previous signs that she would run away from home. Finally, by checking dental records, the police officially confirmed that the burned body was Lynn Carter. While the police were investigating, an unexpected development occurred. Sarah Bryant, one of the suspects present on the night of Lynn's murder, voluntarily turned herself in. Sarah, terrified and haunted by what had happened, decided to cooperate with the police. She told the whole truth and recounted in detail what had happened during that terrible night. Sarah admitted that Rachel Morgan was the main mastermind of the case. Rachel had planned to kidnap and kill Lynn in advance, with the help of Jessica Tate and Monica Reed. According to Sarah's testimony, Rachel harbored deep hatred for Lynn due to previous personal conflicts, and she planned to take revenge in the most brutal way. After getting a statement from Sarah, the police quickly arrested Rachel Morgan, Jessica Tate, and Monica Reed. Initially, the suspects appeared calm, even laughing and showing no remorse. But when confronted with Sarah's testimony, they could no longer hide the truth. After hours of interrogation, Rachel was the first to admit her actions, but instead of feeling remorse, she appeared proud of what she had done. Rachel said that she wanted Lynn to suffer the most pain before she died, so she tortured her victim for hours before taking her to the execution site. Jessica and Monica also confessed their crimes. However, both tried to blame Rachel, saying that they were only following orders and did not intend to kill. At the investigation agency, the perpetrators confessed to the entire process of kidnapping, torturing, and killing Lynn Carter. On that fateful evening, Monica and Sarah pretended to be April's friends to approach and lure Lynn out of the house. At first, Lynn was wary and refused. But after listening to their persuasion, she finally agreed to go with them. Not long after, Rachel suddenly appeared, put a knife to Lynn's neck, and forced her to follow their orders. They took Lynn to an abandoned house, where the real nightmare began. Here, Lynn was brutally beaten. Her hair was burned, and her body was slashed by cold knives. Her cries of pleading only made them more delighted, continuing to torture her for many hours. When they were tired, the group threw Lynn into the trunk and drove around all night, not giving the victim any chance to escape. They stopped several times and opened the trunk to check if Lynn was dead or not. But every time they saw that the girl was still breathing, they beat her mercilessly, leaving her exhausted and in so much pain that she had no strength to call for help. In the early morning of January 11, when they realized that Lynn was still alive, the group decided to end it all with a horrifying act. They dragged Lynn out of the car and took her to a forest along the Ohio River. Rachel coldly poured gasoline on Lynn while the others stood around laughing and mocking. As the fire broke out, Lynn's screams echoed in the quiet night, but no one could save her from her tragic fate. They watched as the fire engulfed her small body, and then walked away as if nothing had happened, leaving behind a scene of a barbaric crime that no excuse could erase. After the case came to light, the whole of America was shocked by the brutality of the crime. An innocent 12-year-old girl was brutally tortured and murdered by teenagers, but their actions were as cold and cruel as those of professional killers. The media continuously reported on the case, causing public outrage and demands for a suitable sentence for the perpetrators. Newspaper articles, television reports, and radio discussions revolved around the question. How could these young girls be so cruel to appear? What made them so heartless and violent? Under pressure from the public, the justice system decided to prosecute all 4 suspects as adults, even though they were still minors. The trial took place with special public attention. The defense attorneys tried to argue that the defendants were all young, immature girls influenced by their family's circumstances and surroundings, but that could not justify their barbaric actions. It did not take the jury long to reach a verdict, as the evidence against the perpetrators was overwhelming. The confessions from the defendants themselves, along with the physical evidence from the crime scene, made it impossible for any of them to deny. Rachel Morgan, the main conspirator, was sentenced to 60 years in prison for aggravated murder. She showed no remorse when she heard the verdict and even maintained a cold attitude in court, which further pained the victim's family. Jessica Tate, who played an active role in torturing Lynn Carter, was also sentenced to 60 years in prison. Monica Reed, who was not as directly brutal as Rachel and Jessica, but was still deeply involved in the case, was also sentenced to 60 years in prison. However, due to her good behavior during her sentence was reduced, and she was released in 2006, causing much controversy among the public. Sarah Bryant, the only one who cooperated with the police and showed remorse, received the lightest sentence of 20 years in prison. She was released in 2000 after serving part of her sentence, which angered the victim's family, who felt that Sarah's involvement in the case was not to be taken lightly. Rachel Morgan and Jessica Tate were finally released in 2019 after completing most of their sentences. The freedom of those responsible for one of the most brutal murders in American history continues to spark controversy, with many believing that justice has not been fully served. Lynn Carter tragically passed away in a case that shocked the United States. An innocent 12-year-old girl was kidnapped by people who were supposed to be her friends and brutally tortured for hours before being burned alive. The perpetrators, though only minors, acted with unbelievable brutality, shocking and infuriating not only the victim's family, but also the American public. What made these young women act so cruelly? Was it simply blind jealousy? Or was it an alarming sign of the decline of morality and values in society? For Lynn Carter's family, the pain of losing their beloved daughter is a wound that will never heal. Her mother, Caroline Carter, was devastated when she learned about what her daughter had to endure in her final hours. The image of Lynn being tortured, desperately begging for her life, and then burned alive in a deserted place haunted her for the rest of her life. However, instead of wallowing in pain, Caroline decided to turn her loss into motivation to help others. After the case, she actively participated in programs to raise awareness about youth violence, organizing talks about the dangers of hatred and the negative effects of being influenced by herd mentality. She also supported families whose children were victims of crime, helping them find hope amid irreparable losses. The Lynn Carter case is not only a story about a horrific crime, but also raises many questions about society. How could teenage girls commit such cruel acts? Were they influenced by their surroundings? Or was this a sign of a personality deviation from a young age? What responsibilities do the education system, families, and society have in preventing similar tragedies? Although the perpetrators were punished according to the law, for many, the early release of some of them was an injustice. Can those who committed such a barbaric crime really change? Do they deserve a second chance? More than 3 decades later, the memory of Lynn Carter's tragic death still haunts America, becoming one of the most gruesome cases in the country's criminal history. Her story is a painful reminder of the horrifying consequences of hatred, jealousy, and lack of control in the behavior of minors. It is also a wake-up call for parents, educators, and society as a whole about the importance of educating children about compassion, empathy, and awareness of the consequences of their actions. The Lynn Carter case is not only a heartbreaking story in American crime history, but also a profound lesson about human nature, indifference, and society's responsibility to prevent similar tragedies from happening. If time could be turned back, would there be anything that could have changed Lynn Carter's fate? Is there a chance to save the perpetrators of this crime before they fall into darkness? And most importantly, how can we ensure that no other Lynn Carter will suffer the same pain? Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this story and want to dive deeper into more intriguing mysteries, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.